You've probably heard that old joke, what's a band? Well, it's a couple musicians and a drummer. And of course, that's funny because, well, we get to slam on drummers. But beyond that, there's some truth to it. We all sense that it takes a little more to be a musician than the ability to beat on things, right? Well, in the same way, there's a difference between being a guitarist and being a musician as well. At the end of this video, I have a demonstration. I'm going to play something for you, and I would very much like to get your opinion. I'd like you to post in the comment what you think about this musically. Is it music? Is it good music? Or is it technique? What do you think? And I'd like you to post that. So please stick around for that. First, I'll tell you a little bit about my own journey. When I was young, I was really drawn to music with energy. The first time I heard a gain guitar tone, I remember it like yesterday. I was at a friend's house and we're listening to the radio. It was an AM radio station. And this was the mid-70s. Okay, I was a kid. And I heard Kiss, Rock and Roll All Night. And that guitar sound had power. And I had never heard anything quite like it before, I mean, if you indulge me a second, you go back to the mid-70s, what was being played, top 40 radio in the mid-70s, it's Captain and Tennille, Muskrat Love and crap, like that. And so I never heard any real rock until that moment. And that sound riveted me. It had energy. So I got a guitar, I started playing, and I started picking out these Kiss riffs and so forth. Then in the late 70s, I heard Van Halen, for the first time. Their debut album came out, I think it was 78, and Eruption was amazing. Not only gain and power, but now precision and speed. And with that speed came a real sense of energy and intensity. Randy Rhoads came along, I learned some of his stuff soon. Again, intensity, speed, momentum, purposeful lines as well, but certainly some speed. And then Al Di Meola, I went through a little Al Di Meola kick for a while, learned that. So I was always drawn to speed, and I want to say that there's nothing wrong with that. If that's what inspires you, you've got to become enough of a technician of the instrument to dig in and develop your technique, hone your technique so that you can do the things. And that makes you a better player. You might have heard that old line, shoot for the moon, and, even if it doesn't work out, you land among the stars or something. Of course, the person who coined that phrase didn't know anything about astronomy because the stars are millions, hundreds of millions, billions of times farther away than the moon. It should have been the other way around. But the point is that when you go for a big goal, and maybe an ambitious goal, technically, like on the guitar, even if you don't exactly nail that down, you're going to make big, big progress and you're going to get somewhere. So that's kind of the attitude of developing technique. The only thing is we don't want to get so focused on technique that we forget that it's not an end in itself. It's for the purpose of music. If technique becomes an end in itself, then playing the guitar becomes a skill like, juggling 6 fire sticks or something, or typing 250 words a minute, something that's unusual and wow, that's pretty cool. But, guitar is supposed to be something more, at least in my view. It's supposed to be able to come around and be used to create cool music. That's the whole point. The problem is that to get good technique, we find that players have to do a lot of repetition. And we can get so focused, so wrapped up on the technique side of things that we miss the forest for the trees. Especially that's true in this day and age of social media guitarists where, your average attention span is, 12 seconds or something. So if you don't grab some attention, you don't get watched. Well, that kind of stacks the deck toward technique and forgets about music. So it's kind of easy to lose our perspective. We can play a whole lot of notes, but they don't say very much. Now, as we roll down the road of guitar life, that's one of the ditches we can fall into, is getting too focused on technique and forgetting about music. But I should also say there's a ditch on the other side as well. And that is, if you've ever, come across an amateur guitarist, or maybe this is you, who, maybe made some efforts to develop technique and didn't do so hot with it, and then says, I don't want to be too technical because it ruins the music. But I think underneath that, what's really being said is, I tried to develop technique, I failed to develop the technique I wanted, and it's too, painful. I don't want to face the fact that, that I'm not playing up to the level of what would have inspired me, so I'm going to downgrade my expectations and I'm going to say that I don't want it. It's not true. I don't care whether your inspiration is another guitar player or it's the inspiration of the musical ideas in your own head. There's something that we want to aspire to, and we don't aspire to mediocrity. It's way better, to be honest, to not deflect or deny or make excuses. The truth of the matter is technique, it's pretty cut and dried. It's not even personal, and it never was. Frankly, if you didn't get the technique that you want, there's really just the fact that you didn't apply the right approaches with the right guidance. That's all there is to it. So we got this problem that crops up here. We want to reach for things that stretch us. And how do you do that on the guitar? Well, we dig in and we practice. And this is where things get a little bit tricky, because you need the repetition, but repetition also becomes boring. Repetition is the enemy of music and musical inspiration to some degree. So you kind of need to bounce back and forth. And that's why in Total Picking Control, I structured this big course. Yeah, we're working on repetition, but I am doing it kind of deceptively. I'm giving you repetition that doesn't feel like repetition because I've turned it into music. I've turned it into songs, and you're playing these songs and there's a lot of other things happening to listen to at the same time. That's developing your musicianship, by the way, is being able to hear more than just the part you're playing, hearing how what you're playing is contributing to the whole. Anyway, that brings me to the example I want to play for you. At the end of Total Picking Control, the highest level stuff that we're getting to there is a lot of sweep picking, fast stuff, and of course that holy grail at first to the technician of the instrument looks like, oh, I want to sweep these big arpeggios because they sound so cool and impressive and everything. And there's nothing wrong with that fascination. That again, that's a stage. You want to go through that so that you can really get it down. But when that's overused, it's extremely boring, okay? It doesn't do much musically. I'm like, okay, I've got to write music that includes enough repetition, that's enough of a stretch and a challenge that's really going to get us where we want to be, technically speaking, and yet I want it to be music. And that's kind of a difficult bridge to cross to bring those two things together. So I'm going to play a little bit of this piece for you that's at the end of this Total Picking Control. And what I want you to do, if you would, is tell me if you think it's music, if you think it's good music, or if it's boring. I would like your opinion, and don't worry if you have a harsh opinion. I don't really mind you sharing that either. Enter your comment below. I would love to see every single person who views this actually putting some kind of comment below. Thanks.